All right, so now let's go back into our scene. Let's load up our instances and take a render of everything here. So let's go to our instances, load them all up. Let's load back our terrain mountain. Wait for that to load up. And let's just get a good angle of where we want to view all this at here. Okay, so to make things quicker, I'm going to turn off the displacement in the terrain mountain. So I'm going to go to our tessellation tab, turn off displacement. Going to need to remember to turn that back on. Let's view wireframe here. All right, so let's just take a render of everything as it is right now. All right, so here we have it, and everything's looking pretty good. And already we're getting some pretty good kind of results, and it's fairly quick to render as well. So let's just kind of save this image. So now let's work on getting some randomization within the shaders for all the instances. So, all right, let's go and maybe just work on our instance number 2 here. I'm going to turn off the other instances. So let's just work on the one instance. So if we go into our shader of our, let's see here, our instance 2 is rainforest tree 2. So let's go into our shader of our redshift tree 2, but in the leaves. So now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to randomize the shader for every instance. And we're going to use this by using an redshift shader switch. So let's throw down an RS shader switch here. And now we just want to plug in our main shader into shader 0 and our out color. Let's hook that back up. So now what we can do is we can duplicate our shader here. Maybe we can collapse this here. We can duplicate this a couple times, and we can hook this up into the shader, and then we're going to tell it for every instance we're going to randomly select each one of these shaders here. So if we kind of hook up our out color into the second shader, 0 is first, second is shader 1. Since our numbers start from 0, let's hook this up to shader 2. So now we've got 3 shaders hooked up here. So for the first shader, I want to keep our color here. And the second shader, what I'm going to do is throw down a color correct. And I'm just going to throw this on the texture of our beauty here, our diffuse color. We're going to color correct that color there, and then let's just copy and paste that and color correct the other one there. We'll plug that in. All right, so now we need to give it a selector to tell the instances how to select these shaders. So let's go into our top node. Into the instance, we need to create an attribute here. So I'm going to throw down an attribute create, or we can just throw down an attribute randomize. So what we're going to do is create this attribute randomize, the attribute name, let's call it leaves color. Now you can call this whatever you want. I'm going to call it leaves color. And the distribution, I'm going to use uniform discrete with a max value here of 0 to whatever. So however many shaders you want to hook up. So right now I've got 3 shaders on the leaves. I could do 1 or 0 to 2. So 0, 1, 2 is 3 shaders. But one thing I'm going to do is I want to actually twice the amount of one color and half the amount of my other shaders. So I'll show you a better example when we get into it. So essentially I'm going to create 4 shaders. So from value of 0 to 3 is 0, 1, 2, 3. So we're just going to give it a value of 0 to 3 sequentially by 1 digit. And we're going to call it leaves color. That's all we need to do. And then we need to turn the dimensions down to 1. All right, so let's just throw down a null and call this out. All right, so now let's go in back to the shader. Leaves 2. And now to pull up that attribute that we just created, we need to throw down a rs user data integer. And then this is what we're going to pull up that name here. So leaves color. And so this is giving everything a value of either 0, 1, 2, or 3. And we're going to connect that to the selector. And it's going to pull up either 0, 1, 2, or 3. So you see that we don't have anything in the third shader here, so it'll just be white. So essentially, we've got 4 shaders into 100% of our instances. So you can think of this as each shader will be given 25%, will be assigned to 25% of our instances. So essentially, we're giving 25% this material, 25% this material, 25% this material, and then 25% is not going to have a shader. But if we just connect our original material to that one as well, we're going to give this one 50% of this. We're going to give the instances 50% of this material now. So I just wanted to do that to give some randomization, but then mostly 50% is going to be our regular color here that we actually, our main color. All right, so let's open up our render view. Let's take a render here. All right, so we've got all of our trees here, and they're all given one color at the moment. So now we can go on to 25% of the trees. We can adjust our color correct here. So we can change the hue to slightly change the color in 25% of those trees. So you can see now that we're slightly giving some a kind of grayer tinge to it. So you can see the before and after. 25% are getting this gray here. All right. Let's go in and change the other correct. Give it another color. And we're going in the wrong direction here. I want to keep it relatively close to the original color, so the hue shift, if we just kind of go to the opposite end of 0, which would be 360 on this side, we're going to change it slightly away from the hue that it was. There we go. And also we could increase the saturation of these as well. So you can see how we can just color correct each node, assign this to different trees, and we can get a lot of different randomization. And we can also layer up these shader switches. We could do this for pretty much any attribute. So you can see the power in layering up all of these different attributes. Really great. So that's what I'm going to do for that. I'm going to keep it relatively subtle and simple, but you can see how we're just kind of slightly changing the colors here. That's great. So I'm going to use the same thing for our palm trees, our regular leaves. So let's just hide that. Let's just stop that and go in to our instance from a palm tree here. I'm going to bring those back, and I'm just going to copy our attribute randomize here. I'm going to paste that in our palm tree. So we're assigning our palm tree now an attribute and giving it 4 possible combinations. Let's go into our palm tree leaves color, palm leaves. And let's do the same thing. So I'm going to throw down an RS integer user data. I'm going to call this leaves color. And let's throw down a shader switch. Let's plug our first shader into our 0 there. Plug in our shader selector. And now we've got 4 variations of this material that we can plug in. And by the way, if you select this from the top down and then plug these in, Houdini is going to automatically plug each wire in the order that you selected it in, which is pretty great. All right, so let's go to our material 2. Material 2, and I'm just going to start changing the colors just a little bit, maybe make this one a little yellow. I don't want too much variation. You know, I want to keep it fairly subtle. In our 4th, there we go. So we've changed up all the different 4 colors of our leaves here. So now, if we take a render, and there we go, we've got all our palm trees back. And I'm going to turn on bucket rendering again. Let's just choose an area so we can see the difference. Okay, this is taking a little bit longer than I expected, so I'm going to turn off our global illumination. Let's go to our out node here, and let's go to global illumination. I'm just going to turn this off, so let's just stop this. Start it again. All right, so here's a render with and without the color variations on the palm trees and our other tree there. And you can really see the difference. It looks way better have that little bit of variation. And that looks pretty great. All right, so I'm just gonna hook back up our shader there. Let's hook back up that variation. And finally, I'm going to reintroduce the original rainforest tree here. But in these trees, I'm not actually going to add any variation color, but I'm going to actually reduce the overall scale of them. And essentially, I'm going to have them a lot smaller to kind of almost act like bushes. So I'm going to make them like half the size. So it'll be almost like a secondary, another layer of tree that are kind of half the size of the trees, almost like these little bushes. So all I'm going to do for that is just go into the attribute randomize here. Just throw down a null to keep things clean. I'm just going to make the overall scale. In the global scale, I'm going to just turn everything down to 0.5. So now we've got these little shrub trees that are, they're all going to be the same color, but it's got a good shader on them anyways, and we're barely going to see them. They're going to be underneath the canopy anyways, and maybe that'll help fill in some of those blanks. All right, so that's pretty much it. And finally, if we were concerned about the color of our mountain here, we could go into our material and just kind of darken up our terrain, the actual color of, we're using the CD channel, which is the main color channel. Maybe we just want to color correct that. I know with the displacement, like this color kind of looked like a bright green grass to me, and with the displacement it gives a lot more detail. So I'm not totally concerned, but maybe I do just kind of want to bring down the gamma of that a little bit. So if I just take one full render with displacement, let's take a look at how everything looks all together. So let's turn on the displacement from the terrain mountain. And I'm going to turn on global illumination again so we can really get to see. Let's go to out. Let's turn on global illumination again. Let's take one render of everything, see what we get. All right, so here's our final render, and you can see it with the global illumination here and without, and it really makes quite a big difference. But it really looks a lot better with a lot of this breakup in the textures and the different colors in that. And before the end, I'm probably going to want to turn down the color maybe of our terrain mountain a little bit. But for now, I think that's looking pretty good. So with that in mind, let's continue on and let's go set up our volcano pyro now.